Hello, everybody. This is Michael Beverly. Welcome to my channel. Today, I have a guest who probably does not need an introduction to my audience. I doubt there's anybody that doesn't know Dave Farina or the professor who explains every fucking thing on the planet. Um, is there anything else you could add to that introduction, like who you are and what you do, what you're about, in case there's any strangers that don't know who Professor Dave is?
That would be the bulk of it. Yeah, YouTube channel Professor Dave Explains. I try to offer a lot of academic tutorial content as well as debunking content. Wrote a book, give talks, very serious about rehabilitating public perception of science.
Yeah, that's a hard task, isn't it? Like
Oh, yeah.
people are. I was with. This is the weirdest thing to me. So I was a young Earth creationist, and I was in where Fullerton is, right? Orange
Yeah.
County, the Anaheim, the Disneyland. So
Yeah.
I wrote my high school report on why evolution was a lie. This is in the 80s. I was quoting Chick publications and Dwayne Gish. Now, if I could go back to my old self, I'd say you're a fucking moron. But I was marinated in that environment. Did you deal with this? I'm assuming you did as a teacher. Like how do you want to shake somebody and say, hold on, like,
Yeah. Very little. I did not grow up in that at all. I grew up in a vacuum of religion. There were obviously some religious people in school, but I didn't know personally of any young Earth creationists. The only experience I have with it is that back in the day, I used to teach science in order to make a living, and I briefly taught at an Orthodox Jewish high school. So yeah, younger, like that kind of a thing. And it was the only job I could find at that time. And I was explicitly told, teach biology, but not evolution, teach astronomy, but not Big Bang cosmology. Just like,
yeah.
okay, what do you want me to teach? Like, why do you have a science teacher if you don't want them to learn science?
It
Like,
it sort of
such a facade,
undercuts it undercuts the foundation of everything in
Absolutely.
biology, right?
Yeah.
Like what
It's
where
like
do you go with that?
I can teach you like the names of the cell organelles, I guess. Like what are we gonna do? Like it's about it.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, one of the things I hated about that, like I loved biology in high school, but I hated the idea that so much what I was taught was memorization. Like
mhm.
learn the name of the mitochondria or the this or the phylums and species, but never critical thinking, never like how to think about stuff. Do you think that's changing or getting worse in America?
I don't know. I mean, I get that kind of question a lot, and it's not been my experience. I was very fortunate. I lived in a good, I mean, I had public schooling, but in the part of Connecticut I was in, it was very good public school. So I had a great, I was taught critical thinking. We learned, when you learn chemistry and biology and physics, like, yeah, obviously you have to learn terminology and you have to memorize some stuff, but we were totally taught how to apply it, and everything we learned was taught in the context of the history of science and how that knowledge was derived, and where we are now and what we're thinking. And then obviously in college it was only 100 times better than that.
Right.
So I don't know. It's like I have a master's in science education, so we obviously looked very heavily at educational standards and NGSS and like what it is that is trying to be implemented federally in the educational
Mhm.
system. And it's good, they're good standards, you know what I mean? So definitely some people receive a poor education because they're in a poor area, or education is underfunded. Obviously teachers are underpaid, those are enormous problems, but the standards themselves, like, I don't think that there's a huge problem with the way science education happens. It's mainly these other outside influences that are actively
Mm.
trying to polarize people against science, that it's just, that ends up winning with minds that are not really, never really enjoyed science, found it to be difficult. So to hear an influence that says, hey, that was actually all wrong and you should be hostile towards it, they're very eager to have a reason to rebel against this information they didn't want to learn in the first place.
Yeah, it's an indoctrination. So I just today happened to be a busy day. I streamed with AJ, and anybody that's wondering, she has a wonderful channel, and she's saying she loves your channel because she uses it for homeschooling and teaching.
Hmm.
Because you're such a good presenter. So when her and I were talking, we were talking about that very problem. How when you're raised, and I know I was raised this way, you're going to Sunday school every week and you're be told God made the world, God made the rainbow, Noah's Ark. And by the time you get to, you can't really teach evolutionary biology to a 4-year-old, right? So,
No, yeah.
so by the time you get to that age where you're learning those things, you've had years and years and years and years of indoctrination.
Yeah.
And that was what really handicapped me. It was mind blowing. Well, I became an atheist and I didn't believe evolution was true. And I said to myself, that can't be. I have to learn, right? Because I was never taught. So I picked up some Dawkins and Jerry Coyne's wonderful book, Why Evolution's True. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's a combination of like I try to do two things. I want to offer academic content just at face value. This is what you learn in school, and I'm going to not oversimplify, but simplify it as much as possible so that it is palatable, easy to digest, which I think spurs interest. Simply, if it's intelligible, people are more interested in it. So that's over here. This is if you want the information, but then I also go ahead and identify the bad faith actors and neutralize their specific rhetoric. So it's kind of a double, a two-tiered approach of offering the information, but then also neutralizing the lies that people are receiving. So whichever of the two is more successful for an individual, or a combination. Yeah.
Everybody has their own sort of bias or blocks and they need a different thing. And I think that's one of the things that you do well. And one of the things I think why you have such a strong fan base is that you don't chicken out with calling things how they are and being very forceful. And that was one of the things when I approached you about having this talk, I wanted to ask you maybe to comment a little bit and maybe give a little bit of a life lesson. I was a little bit blindsided, although I shouldn't have been. So I had Michael Behe come on, and I wanted to talk about irreducible complexity. I just wanted to talk about the science of that. So I had a friend of mine, fellow YouTuber, Dr. Jay Bundy. He's got a double PhD, he's smart as fuck, and he told me this isn't going to work. Like, it's just not going to work. I mean, he's a friend of mine, so he did it anyways. And he did it, because he cares about me and he wanted to help. And I was shocked about how it went because I wasn't prepared. So one of the things maybe you could help elucidate is, why was I so fucking shocked? Like, I actually read some of the Dover transcripts and I sort of get it, but now I get it more. And I've watched some of your interactions with James Tour. So it's not like I'm not an innocent sheep here, but I was still kind of shocked that side just doesn't want to really talk science, do they?
No, of course not. Behe in particular, being one of the primary architects of this intelligent design propaganda movement, perhaps in his youth got into it earnestly, but decades later has had all of this debunked to his face so many times. He absolutely knows he's lying. And in content I've made specifically on him, I've exposed such blatant dishonesty, manipulation of data tables, and like just things where it's just like, he absolutely knows he is misrepresenting science. And for the purpose of spreading propaganda, that's what he's paid to do, right?
Yeah.
He's not a scientist. He doesn't do research. He lies. He writes books and lies. That's what
he doesn't write. Yeah, he doesn't do papers and participate in the real science.
No.
Do you think it's driven by a true ideology belief, like he really believes Jesus wants that, or is it profit, or is it a mixture?
I think if I'm going to be charitable, I'm going to say it's a mixture. I'm not going to say that all of these figures, Behe, Meyer, Tour, that they, in their youth said, I'm going to I'm going to deceive all these people. I think that they genuinely believed it and still to an extent believe it. But the level of self-deception, how long and how deeply can you deceive yourself before decades later at some point you have to understand that you are lying. Everything you're writing is a lie. You're looking at a paper, you're lying about what's in the paper, you're doing these very, very active and detailed exercises in distortion of the facts. B, he knows he's lying, but I mean, he's stuck. Like, this is the career path he's chosen, and like he is, gets paid to lie.
Yeah.
This is what they
None of
do.
these
So
people, none of these people are stupid, right? They're all intelligent.
yeah, B, he's not
It,
dumb. James Stewart's not dumb. Stephen Meyer's not dumb. They're not Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind is dumb. But actually, he has an element of cleverness to him, because it's not that easy to spin rhetoric on the fly that quickly. So but no, certainly not. And that's the most dangerous part about it, is that a guy like Behe does understand the fundamentals of molecular biology, obviously, right?
Mhm.
That's how he's able to use these concepts and terminology to spin an air of of academic dissent, right? I am a scientist who doesn't agree with the mainstream. I'm the rebel against the
Right. And
huge.
you do remember Galileo, right?
Sure.
Sometimes the minority is got the right answer, right? The going against the grain.
Yeah, but see that everybody who brings up the Galileo thing, he was dissenting against the Catholic Church, right? It's not like
Yeah.
the scientific community, like he was
Oh,
rebelling
yeah.
against the scientific community. He didn't even come up with heliocentrism, right? It was Copernicus first, and then Kepler was the one who really corroborated it, right? And developed
Mhm.
and figured out, elliptical orbits and things like that. Galileo just produced more data and continued to push for the heliocentric model, but he didn't come up with it. Like, he wasn't doing some incredible grand thing within the
Yeah,
scientific community
I
or
read.
church.
Tell me if this sounds true. Galileo's big thing was turning an instrument of war, i.e., the telescope,
Hmm.
to the heavens, and the kickback on that was that's God's domain. You're not really supposed to spy into space, but he worked out how to use the telescope to find stuff. Is that
Well,
correct?
I think that I think at first that even the church was not against looking out upon God's creation, right? And looking at
Mhm.
the majesty and the wonder of God's creation. I think the problem came when, yes, absolutely, he expanded the limits of observational astronomy at the time, but he saw things like he was the first to see the four biggest moons of Jupiter. We call them the Galilean moons because he saw them first. And it's the problem with that is that everything's supposed to be going around the Earth. Well, wait,
Right.
these are
Yeah.
things going around Jupiter. They're
Something
going around
else.
something
Yeah.
else. So what's going around is and then he observed the phases of Venus and other things, which are like, well, this is clearly about the illumination from the sun. This is going around the sun. So that this is not the first line of heliocentric thinking, but it's just additional data to throw on the pile, to the point where anybody in astronomy in the time of Galileo, looking at this data, thinking rationally, has to conclude, all right, heliocentrism was already looking pretty good, but this is, I mean, come on, who is going to argue with this now? The
Sure.
solar system is heliocentric, or at the time, the universe, they thought. But
Well, but don't you know, Dave? That's the way the Bible always described it.
oh, sure, I don't know. Your
It
son
was
say that?
always that way. Yeah, it was always
Yeah.
that way. Well, it's funny because sometimes you'll hear intellectual or maybe pseudo intellectual Christian apologists argue, like, well, of course Noah's flood isn't literal. The Bible never meant that, and of course it's not scientific. But it's like, wait a minute. But then where do you pick what you're gonna
Yeah.
choose to be as literal or not literal? It seems like a cherry picking game of
Sure. It depends what your intent is. Actually, as we speak, I'm writing my scripts for what I call the definitive guide to debunking creationism. So it's going to be a long 5-part series, extensive, going into every single little thing. And of course, at the top, I delineate the types of creationists, all the way from like biblical literalist, flat earth, geocentric, ignoring
Mhm.
all of science, all the way up to like deistic evolution, which is God went that, and then the universe is how science describes, and everything in between. And so of course I acknowledge that, like, even Discovery Institute, Intelligent Design, these proponents are dramatically less unscientific than young earth creationists, because they accept geological time, astronomical time, even common descent and things like that. It's just that they pick very particular places to be dishonest for specific political purposes, for the point of manipulation. But obviously we have to admit that what they say is not as unscientific as a young Earth creationist preacher, right? So
Right.
there are gradations to the unscientificness of creationism.
Yeah, I was a young Earth creationist living on Maui, and somebody introduced me to Hugh Ross. So as a, I'm still evangelical, I still believe, but I read Hugh Ross's book, and then I looked at the islands, and I said to myself, do I really want to believe in a God that would create Kauai with river? I mean, you can water ski on rivers on Kauai, but on Maui, where I lived, you couldn't because there wasn't enough time for erosion. So it was obvious to me that the world couldn't be young unless God made it that way and tricked me. And I couldn't believe in that God. So I transferred to, and then I got into intelligent
Older
design.
creationist, and
Yeah.
So
And
you had a
I,
stepwise
I had to step up. Yeah.
exiting. Yeah.
And it wasn't until I became an atheist, like I had rejected the theology, and I said, okay, I don't believe there's a God. Maybe there is, but I don't believe it. And I'm rejecting, Christianity specifically. But what about this evolution stuff? Like, and so that's when I read and learned about it. Now you had mentioned politics there a little bit. I want to ask you about this Piers Morgan with the ironic uncensored, but then you got censored. I mean, I think they kicked you off on purpose, although you were kind of charitable.
Probably. I don't know though. I mean, honestly, it's possible that they just overbook many segments and then just kick one off. Just like, oh, we're gonna okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I definitely don't believe like the couldn't get a van here.
The narrative didn't sound well. It was interesting too because the guy, the crypto guy, the guy that was on the right hand side.
No, the Tom. Yeah,
Tom. So I got sucked into crypto and NFT stuff, and I used to listen to him, and I realized after a while these guys are sharks. They're selling, So I don't really like. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but he definitely
a little culty.
It rubs me the wrong way. And I thought, no, wait a minute. Why would this panel doesn't seem balanced if you really want to talk about the subject?
No,
if you don't have Dave or somebody that has the same viewpoint. And so I'm assuming you would agree that this is a problem in society, like whether it's news or in general, that that position is kind of shut up. Like, do you feel like that, like the general consensus of the population, the news or whatever, looks at you as being too aggressive or too dogmatic or you're too scientific?
Certainly some do. I mean, like science deniers obviously think I'm dogmatic about science when I'm just explaining science. There are definitely also pro-science people who don't like my style, which is totally fine. I'm extremely aggressive. I don't mince words, and and I certainly can offend people, and but I don't like, that's just my style, and I encourage other science communicators to discover their own style. But as to what you said, yes, it is disheartening when we're supposed to, these pundits are assembling panels that are meant to have diverse viewpoints, and we're going to say, here's some anti-science people, here are the pro-science representatives, what do you guys think? And it's just a bunch of like anti-establishment loons. It's like, this is not a proper representation of, like, where is the voice of the scientific community? You've got Eric Weinstein, who's on a crusade to spread anti-establishment propaganda to elevate himself and his crackpotness. Keating's a little bit of a bootlicker, and then Tom has no clue what science is. Like, he doesn't understand science. So like, what kind of a panel is that? I'm not saying I it should have been me, but nor should it even necessarily have been like Neil Tyson, who is like certainly an appropriate representative of the scientific community, but at this point very steeped in science popularization. So it's hard to know who the figures should be and how to get them more involved in the popular conversation, because it's severely lacking right now.
Yeah, and you can easily fall into the space of it becoming entertainment. Like, you remember the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate thing, and people had different viewpoints on that. It was kind of like, oh, wait a minute, you're getting down to this level, and then it's almost like you've lost before you even started, because you're almost acting like there's credibility there.
Yes, to an extent. And so that is where opinion seeps in. So I'm of the opinion that Bill wasn't hard enough. But other people are of the opinion that if someone is as hard as I am, when I debated James Tour, he's a fraud, he's a liar, this is how he's lying, this is how he's a fraud, this is what he's, that obviously is more effective in showing the reality, but it also does rub people the wrong way, and they're going to react emotionally and just shut down. So, I mean, I think that it's a disservice that anybody left that thinking that Ken Ham won. It's preposterous. Everything
Right.
I mean, I never watched it top to bottom. I kind of have skimmed it, and obviously Bill provided totally accurate information, and was pretty well spoken about it. But it's like, if I was in there, like, this is a lie, this is a lie, this is a lie, this is like, you need to, I'm of the opinion that you need to show the reality of the dishonesty.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and that was sort of the lesson that I had sitting there feeling a little uncomfortable with the Michael Behe, and I realize now that Jay was right all along, and I'm thoroughly in that camp, and I'm thoroughly a fan of your content. But I guess but I guess the critic would say, yeah, well, but Michael, you're a fan of Dave because you agree with that, and then maybe you're leaving out some people in the middle that won't listen to you. And I guess at the end of the day, that's too bad, right?
Look, I mean, here's the problem. Like, there's not one way to do this, because people are not one way. They don't accept information in one way. So there's no way to say this is the way you must do this. My way is not right. Bill Nye's way was not right. It's a way. Right. And we should do all of the ways. you know. But I skimmed also the thing that you sent me with Jay, and I did definitely saw moments where I was like, all right, this guy and me were, cut from the same cloth. And it was absolutely glorious to watch Behe just kind of squirm and whine, because he knew that somebody was speaking truth and exposing his dishonesty right to his face, which is what I do. And I love doing that too.
Yeah, no, I think well, if I had contacted Behe and said, I want to set up a conversation with, Professor Dave, he would have said, no, I'm busy.
No, he would not have accepted that. Nobody at DI would ever do that.
Yeah, I don't think they knew who Jay was, and now they do. So he's probably on their radar.
And I'm sure they've already have they done like Evolution News hit piece blog posts on him and stuff like that?
I haven't checked, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it didn't get enough traction, but my stuff gets a lot of traction. So
you're a much huger channel.
Dozens of character assassination pieces.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, you're right. Well, because you're working for the devil, obviously.
Sure,
you're on the wrong side.
Satan boy.
Let me. I would like to ask sort of a personal question, and you don't have to. You can answer this as comfortable as you feel answering. My dad was a teacher. He was a marine biologist. My parents divorced when I was a little baby. So my dad, who was believed in evolution and taught marine biology, I saw him at Christmas time all through my early childhood. So he wasn't an influence when my mom took me to church, et cetera, et cetera. But I love my dad. We stayed in contact, and he was explaining to me how he got tired of teaching. And he said something that you said too. He said, I realized I was getting paid like less than the trash collectors, right? And it was a hard job. He actually taught at Punahou when Obama was there. That's how my dad left. My dad left Downey. He's like, it's a white ghetto. I want to get out. So he left Downey, goes to Hawaii, loves surfing. He's a marine biologist, teaches at UH, goes to Punahou. He likes his job. And then he ends up at a continuation high school teaching science. And the kids, continuation schools, problematic kids. And he finally just said, that's it. I'm fucking done. And he became a fisherman. His reason was, my dad never took me fishing. I want to go fishing. So he became a commercial fisherman. And he actually won. It's pretty cool. My dad won the World Wildlife Fund's first annual Smart Gear competition. It was a competition to invent something that commercial fishermen or other people in that environment would actually use, but also saved some species. So he invented this long line technique that helped save turtles. So he won a big contest. We went to Washington, D.C., the press club. It was really cool. But my dad went back to his job out of education. So to come full circle, my personal question is, what about you got you in this space? Like, you just love teaching. Yeah. You're obviously a great teacher, or was it serendipity or a mixture?
So, I never had any interest in teaching as a career or being a scientist or anything of that nature. I'm an artist. I am a musician, but throughout my 20s was pretty convinced that music would be my career. I just found teaching teaching science to be the easiest way to generate some income while pursuing music. And then in terms of the channel, I was in a band that was touring a lot, and so we'd find it's hard to have regular jobs, you know. And in fact, I had to, you know, I had a teaching job at a trade university, and I kind of lost it because I was like being pulled in this direction of the touring band. And so it was just a desire for passive income. I said, I'm going to take my organic chemistry lectures. I'm going to deliver them to camera, put them online. Maybe I'll make some money with that. So it's never, you know, now I've found a lot of purpose with it, especially with the debunking stuff. So I'll never leave the science communicate. SciComm will always be a part of my career, but I still have an ambition to, you know, ultimately art is what I want to do with my life. And
maybe you can make science videos with, you know, music, and you
well,
could be the hip hop science.
Yeah, I'm going to make music theory and music performance content at some point, like introductory drumming and piano and like reading music, and then like ethnomusicology and all that stuff. Because that stuff, you know, when I was in college, I had the foresight to get a chemistry degree, but ultimately I was taking music classes, music lessons. I was in different ethnic percussion ensembles, and so I have all of that knowledge. And it's just harder to film, so I have to figure out how to film it. It's a little bit trickier than just narrating and doing animations. But to answer your original question, teachers are heroes, kind of. Like, it's just like teaching it, the pay is awful and it's hard, and some teachers have kids that are really great, some have kids that are problematic, and then there's the bureaucracy of the institution that you're teaching at, and federal bureaucracy stuff, and it just kind of sucks. And so I never was doing it like, oh, this is my career. Is it always like, oh, my rent in my crappy room in my San Francisco apartment is $550 a month, so I need to make like $1,500 a month to pay rent and like gas and beer, you know, like I just need to get by. So, you know, I'll do that. And that's just what, you know, instead of like my friends, you know, my bandmates would bartend or do whatever, that this was how I made money, you know. I definitely found, at least at the trade university job, because these were adult learners that were very actively engaged in, they're trying to, most of them were doing a career shift, so they want to go into some medical field, but they don't have the prerequisite courses because they didn't do a science major, and so they would have to take OChem and all of these other, you know, anatomy and physiology and things in order to apply for med school. So I would teach them OChem. They're there just terrified that they have to learn OChem, but they need to do this career thing that they really want to do. And so because I explained it immaculately well, they loved it. They loved me. They loved it. They're like, I can't believe that you made this easy enough for me to learn in 2 months. Thank you. You know, and so when you get that back, so I got passionate about figuring out, you know, I taught the course like 8 or 9 times. And so each time my lectures got a little better and a little better and more succinct and more clear and better examples and things. And so I found that a fun intellectual challenge. And then also I was getting the reward of the positive feedback from students. So that was the best version of teaching for me. But I've done substitute teaching in like low income, you know, Oakland and Compton and stuff. And it sucks, you know?
Yeah, it's super hard when you're dealing with so many issues outside of just trying to teach a class.
Yeah.
Do you think that leads the people that stay end up being probably maybe some of the worst candidates to be teachers? I know I was explaining to somebody the other day about how I didn't learn to love history until I started reading books as an adult on my own, because my history teacher was the football coach who knew nothing about history. And he taught by Friday will be a quiz on chapter 13, read it. And then you know, and then you read it and you take this Xerox test. You know, I'm old enough to remember when you smell the chemicals from the Xerox machine, and you know, it's A, B, C. And if you're reasonably smart, you can almost not even study and get a passing grade. But I hated history. I thought this was the stupidest thing ever. Why do I care? And it wasn't until later when I read books by people that cared about it, I caught their passion. And I think that's where people they connect with you. I mean, my dream would be for teaching kids online with somebody like you that loves a passionate topic and
Hmm.
can teach 10,000 kids instead of a classroom of 30
Sure.
where most don't even care.
Or at least in conjunction with classroom learning, right? A blended model. Yeah, it's like, look, some teachers are going to get burnt out and jaded and be mediocre teachers or even bad teachers. Some are amazing and passionate and remain passionate throughout their careers, and obviously there's going to be those and everything in between. And I don't blame, it's hard. It's hard to stay that passionate when you're being paid so poorly. If it was up to me, I'd flip a switch and double the pay of every teacher. I would pay them, way more, literally double probably what they get, I think is the minimum that they deserve, because it's not an easy job. And, if that were the case, I think it would attract, it would invigorate teachers and attract better teachers to the profession and things of that nature. And so, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but the underfunding of education, it's gotten progressively worse. It's not just Republicans; it's Democrats too. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bleak.
Do you think the college model would do better if it started earlier? Like, you go to college and you can have a lecture with a bigger auditorium, and you're kind of given more responsibility, as opposed to, it seems like, at least from my memory, we're still in high school, you're 16, 17, you're being treated like a child, and you're going to class. It's like too many classes in one day. Your brain can't really think of 8 subjects in one day. Whereas,
yeah, but it was low rigor. Like, I found high school to be extremely easy, and then college was obviously more challenging, fewer classes, but much more depth. I don't know. It's hard to comment. All I have is my own experience, and I think that my educational experience from childhood through university was exactly right. I think it was the appropriate amount of rigor, and I don't know. I mean, again, as I said, I got lucky and I had a good public education. And I went to the college I went to, called Carleton College in Minnesota, is unbelievable, incredible institution that I can't say enough good things about. But that was my experience. Everybody has there are different experiences, different socioeconomic situations, and different styles of learning, different types of people, and so I don't know. I mean, the only problem with the current university model is the cost, and that's largely because in the past there was federal funding for higher learning, and that's not a thing anymore. So college used to be affordable to everybody. Now it is affordable to almost nobody, and at least unless you go to community college or something, and that is also largely problematic, and I would say somewhat deliberate on the part of the powers that be. And obviously deliberate, or they would put funding into education and lower the cost for everybody. It's insane to me that when somebody like Bernie Sanders or something would say, I'm going to make colleges tuition free for so just basic education, normal state schools tuition free. It's like, that's essentially what we had in the 50s, when everybody, this golden age that certain people left. Oh, if only it was like, yeah, they used to pay for college, right? They used to make college affordable for everybody. So to hear people be detractors, call, oh, that's socialism, or it's just like, you're clearly being trained to have that response by the propaganda you consume, when the era that you're yearning for did all of these things that you're pretending to be against at this point, So it's hard to know how to move forward with any of this.
Yeah, well, this is of course anecdotal, but my own impression of the high school was, I was forced to do stuff and learn stuff I didn't care about, and I was they didn't have the funding or the classes to do stuff that I would have loved. I would have, I would have loved education if it was so. Part of that is, like, I think we try to stick kids in boxes. Not everybody gives a shit about chemistry, and some kids love chemistry. I happen to love animals, so I like biology, but I hated math. So it's when you're forced to, you're sort of forced to, like, okay, here's the program you have to do, and you don't really feel like you have a say in it.
But the thing is that I'm a supporter of the notion that if that federal education, a part of the purpose is to create a populace that is relatively literate and conversant in a variety of topics from chemistry to history. And so I think, I think everyone should be forced to learn basic chemistry and physics and biology, as well as history and other things. I mean, the problem is that we do that, and yet we still end up with a completely science illiterate public, right? When the mRNA vaccines came out and everybody's going, what is mRNA? You learned this in 9th grade. You did, right? You may have had a terrible teacher. You may have forgot, but you definitely learned this. You're supposed to know what mRNA is. So where do we go? I mean, definitely the answer is not making it even less mandatory for you to learn this stuff. I think everybody has to be learning this stuff.
Yeah, maybe in ways. So let me use that as a segue, because one of the ways we learn stuff now is online, and especially when it's entertaining. So this big creator, I'm going to play just a 2-minute clip. If you guys will, I'll just be patient with me because I want to make a point with it. Has this most amazing 3D of the flagellum, the whole thing. He went to he went to Vanderbilt and interviews the guy, and then at the end he just blew my mind with going insane. So let me see if I can play this clip here. Let me know if everybody can hear it.
We can't hear it, but we're seeing it definitely.
There's no sound going through, huh?
That's okay. I mean, you can probably just, everybody saw it, and Dustin was really animated. So
yeah,
I think you can probably summarize what he did there.
Yeah, I can summarize the point. So at the end of this, it's super fascinating. You can download the 3D model for this flagellum mortar that they made, and I do recommend the video. Is super fascinating, and the guy that he interviewed, super fascinating. But at the end, he says, now, this is a big controversy, blah, 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 because everybody wants to plant their flag. It's science versus religion. And I'm a Christian, and I want to advocate that you don't pick a side. And when I heard him say that, I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're saying don't pick science? So,
yeah,
and he's got I mean, that video had millions of views, and he has 11 million subs. There's obviously a lot of people, and he's very personable. I've some of his other content about explaining, say, the physics of something are super fascinating. How do we do a Dave against that? Like, you don't want to, like.
Yeah, no, it's super disappointing from Destin. How do we do a Dave against that? I mean, I kind of already did. I did this on Michael Behe, who is the architect of irreducible complexity as a concept, and specifically uses the bacterial flagellum as his favorite go-to example of an irreducibly complex trait. This has been debunked so many times, it's not even funny. When people like Behe and now Destin talk about the bacterial flagellum, they are not acknowledging the wide variety of flagella that exist, and the varying degrees of complexity that they exhibit. They don't talk about things like the exaptation of proteins for novel purposes, the different ways that mechanistically we absolutely understand how these structures can have developed in an iterative way. They don't talk about how these structures are objectively not irreducibly complex, because there are other structures. He may have talked about the injectosome, but there are reduced structures, flagella-like structures that serve an ulterior purpose with fewer components, and it's creationist propaganda.
They're scared. Yeah. They're scared, aren't they? They're scared if people know that you don't need a God, they'll reject a God. But that's not really true.
I don't think Destin is coming at it from that way. I think he's earnest. I think that I didn't know that he's Christian, but if you're saying, I mean, it makes sense having kind of.
Yeah, he says that. I'm sorry, the sound didn't work, but yeah, he says I'm a Christian, and
which is fine.
Yeah, but no, I have no problem with being a Christian, but that doesn't mean the science on this isn't well established, and you don't need a god of the gaps, right?
No, I just think that he's ideologically predisposed towards falling for create the ID propaganda that Behe produced. He clearly he probably read, you know, some.
This is what he's reading. And, he's pitching this book.
So, you know, and to play devil's advocate, I mean, the way that people like Behe and the other guys at the DI craft their propaganda, it is the single most convincing version of that propaganda that exists. They're very good at doing it, right? It's so much more convincing than what some random preacher says, right? Because they have the terminology, they have the conceptual understanding, and they just very selectively provide certain information, deny other information. So to somebody who is predisposed towards, right, if you believe in the Christian God and you like the idea of special creation by the Christian God, and that because that's invigorating to your faith, you are going to have a bias and be predisposed towards falling for this propaganda. So that's I don't think Destin is like, oh, I got some money from the Discovery Institute to push. Probably not that.
No, he says that he actually said in the video that he was not even letting anyone sponsor the video. It was completely unsponsored. He was saying, if you want to help the channel, I think go to his Patreon or something, but he was saying, I'm not sponsored. And he didn't come across
he gets AdSense revenue. I mean, on millions and millions of views, he made plenty of money on that video, which is fine. That's how I make money. It's not a problem. But no, I don't. It's just, it's disappointing is all. That's all it is.
Yeah, no, I was just disappointed. I was also disappointed, and I was more cognizant of why I was disappointed after going through that thing with Jay and kind of being schooled a little bit about it. Yeah. So no, that's good. Do you, before we wrap this up, do you mind telling me what you think about organic chemistry, Nick Lane type stuff? Is it going to show us in the next 10 or 20 years? Hey, we've got it. We've cracked the nut, or is this going to be going off?
I don't remember exactly what Nick Lane's research is. We're talking about abiogenesis, obviously.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Is he metabolism first? I don't remember.
I listened to him do an interview with Lex Friedman, so it was more conversational.
Yeah.
But he was talking about the study that they were doing where the hot plumes under in the deep parts of the ocean.
Oh, he's geothermal vent.
Yeah. He was talking about those, and that may very well be the key.
I think that the field is more supportive of sort of a hot spring model at this point. I mean, with the geothermal vent, obviously it's not impossible. None of these things are impossible. I don't think that we will ever uncover the precise sequence of events that led to life on Earth. I think that what we're doing is amassing sort of a catalog of possibilities, and then we're going to in the future be able to better weigh these possibilities and the probabilities of each of these steps and how they contributed to the overall process. I think that the two sides of it are synthetic chemistry to get all the materials, but then definitely systems chemistry is the area that is going to help us really understand what happened in terms of how these assemblages of molecules became life. And so we're in a place here where you've got an RNA world model, you've got metabolism first. I think that we're going to continue to see how these come together in different ways, and learn about how autocatalysis may have occurred, and it's so much. It's very difficult to summarize, but
no, of course, it's a super complex thing. Do you think that the advancements in AI is really going to help? So that the fact that it can process. I'm not saying because it's going to become smart and explain it as a human, but it just processes information so fast that maybe that'll be a key to developing it faster.
I mean, I think it's reasonable to say that AI will be steeped in virtually every aspect of human inquiry, probably in the future. I think for systems chemistry, it's sort of about the difficulty of performing these kinds of calculations regarding the assemblages of molecules. You've got RNA chains of wildly differing sequences, trillions upon trillions of different sequences, interactions with proteins. I think AI will help perform rigorous calculations about these questions. But yeah, I don't know a lot about AI, so I don't really know.
Well, who knows? It might wake up and just take a jar of peanut butter and create a new life, and that'll be the end of it. It could, yeah, it could kill us all. Hey, Dr. Jay Bundy's in the house. I don't know if you saw that when you watched those little bits of clips with B. He was on the Linsky, the longest running evolution thing.
Oh, cool.
So that's super fascinating. So everybody wants you, and he's also a musician. So everybody wants you and Jay to get together sometime and make a science song. And
sounds good.
He's a great character. We all love Jay very much. All right, well, let's cap this with something fun. Do you have a favorite fantasy or sci-fi, something just completely fun, nothing to do with like science or education, but just something you watch or listen to or play? Tell us about it.
Well, I love science fiction. My favorite science fiction movie of all time is 2001: A Space Odyssey. My own music has kind of a sci-fi bend to it. I have a few one of my songs is called Tannhauser Gate, which is an ode to Roy Batty from Blade Runner, and I did a music video where I play all the characters and things like that. I have another song called 0 Point Energy, where all the lyrics are about like quantum fluctuation and entropy and things like that. So very nerdy stuff, but also pretty psychedelic. And so,
are you familiar with Greg Egan's work?
I am not.
Yeah, I'll send you a link because you would definitely dig his work. He does quantum physics stuff. He's way out there. And what about? Do you get into fantasy at all? Like like Game of Thrones or zombies?
Yeah. I mean, it has to be really good, but I'd like Game of Thrones a lot. I just watched the season finale of the House of Dragons, and I was quite invested. I'm into it.
I haven't watched. No spoilers. I haven't watched the last couple ones, but I watched season 1 for the third time. A month, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago in preparation. I totally get it. I'm totally nerd out on that.
I like it more even, I think, than Lord of the Rings, just because Lord of the Rings relies so much on fantasy, which is fine because it's a fantastical other realm. But Game of Thrones and in particular House of Dragons, they just feel more real to me. I mean, there's dragons, but it's
the politics, right?
Machiavellian. It's like I get into it, and I'm like, there are some shows where it's that, but it sucks, and I'm like, well, I don't even care. But this is like, it's so good that I'm like, oh yeah, who's that guy? Okay, I remember. Okay, yeah. Oh no, this thing's like, it's very well written, very well acted. I like it a lot.
Yeah, no, I love it. All righty, Dave. Well, you know what? I super appreciate you being willing to come on a small channel like mine. That means a lot to me. It shows me that your heart's about, helping to get the message out.
Yeah.
I really, really, really appreciate it. Everybody out there in the fan base out there, I love you guys. You guys are awesome. Let's keep promoting science. Keep helping smaller channels that are following in the footsteps that the early innovators like Dave kind of broke open the floodgates. And the more that we do this, the more we help people that are questioning their upbringing and because science is so fascinating, so fascinating. All right, folks.
You're here.
Goodbye, everybody.